To get started, take one square of your muslin and your embroidery hoop. Separate the two pieces of the embroidery hoop and place the muslin on top of the circle that does not have a screw at the top. Try to place the embroidery hoop right in the center of your fabric so that your design is in the center and kind of balanced. Then take the other hoop with the screw on top and slide it over the whole thing. Once you've got it, tighten the screw at the top. It goes righty-tighty and then lefty-loosey later when you take it off. This embroidery hoop is going to be taken off at the end, but for now it's a tool that stretches the muslin to make it taut enough to create a successful design with embroidery on top. So you might want to pull around the circle on the edges of the fabric to make sure that there are no wrinkles inside of the hoop. And when you're ready, it's time to choose a color for our first stitch. The thread we will be using is called embroidery floss. And embroidery floss comes in skeins like this. In order to keep the embroidery floss from getting tangled, it's a lot easier to wrap it around a thread bobbin. Some of the embroidery floss that we have is already wrapped around a thread bobbin, but you might find a color that's still in its skein with the two sticker labels on it. So I want to teach you how to grab a thread bobbin and wrap it. To do that, find the end of the embroidery floss, the little tail, and tuck it into the cut on the end of the thread bobbin. Then you want to slowly and carefully wrap the thread around and around the bobbin. And I found that it makes it easier to do this by holding the skein gently and making sure that I'm holding on to both of the stickers, the labels around the embroidery floss. Now, I know in this video it looks like I'm going really fast, but trust me, the slower you go, the less chance you have of tangling the embroidery floss. And also just remember to gently hold the skein. Don't hold on to it too tightly or the thread won't be able to unravel. And once you reach the end of the skein, then tuck the tail into the closest cut on the bobbin. Once that's done, you are all set and ready to cut a length of this embroidery floss. You're gonna have to do this a lot of times because you can't work with a thread that's too long. It's going to get tangled up. We want to work with threads that are 1 arm's length. So grab the tail of the embroidery floss from the bobbin and slowly unravel it until it hits your shoulder. Then cut the thread. Now the thing with embroidery floss, at least the brand and type that we have, is that it actually is really 6 embroidery floss threads twisted together. And it's too thick to fit through the eye of an embroidery needle. So what we need to do is take our needle and press the end of the embroidery floss between our thumb and finger, using our needle to split this thread exactly in half. You'll be able to tell if it's exactly in half by counting how many threads you have on each side. It should be 2 groups of 3. And once you've got it split into 3 and 3, it's time to slowly pull the 2 sides apart. The bottom of the thread wants to twist up and get knotted, so every once in a while you need to take a moment and untwist it as you pull apart the embroidery floss bit by bit. Once you've reached the end of the threads and you have 2 groups of 3, then you are ready to take one of those 2 and thread an embroidery needle. I highly suggest keeping track of that other group of 3 threads, because then you can just use it right away instead of having to cut and split a whole other bit of embroidery floss, right? And when you're ready, pick up an embroidery needle and one of your groups of threads. Make sure the end of the thread is clean. You might want to give it a tiny trim with sharp scissors to make sure that all the 3 threads are lined up, and carefully put the thread through the eye of the needle. Some people like to lick the ends of the thread. You can do that if you're comfortable with it. No matter what you do, try to get the end of that thread through the eye of the needle, grab it on the other end, and pull out a good length of it. Instead of tying the thread to the needle at the top, we are just going to leave a length of thread hanging from the other end. And we will be holding on to this tightly as we embroider. Now, the knot to keep the thread in the fabric is going to be at the end of this thread. And to create the knot, find the tail end to create a circle. Wrap the tail through the center of the circle and then pull both ends of the thread tightly. This knot will ensure that our thread stops and doesn't pull all the way through the fabric as we're making our stitches. Now we're all ready to learn about our first stitch because we have a threaded needle and a knot at the end of it. The first stitch we will be learning about today is the running stitch. A lot of you, I'm sure, have either heard about or already seen or even done a running stitch before. It's really the classic stitch that everybody pictures when they think about sewing. Choose either a white piece of chalk or a pencil to draw out a design to create with the running stitch. The running stitch is a great one to use for lines and shapes. So with your pencil or your chalk, your choice, draw out a line or a shape on which you will be embroidering. Then grab up your needle and thread and start to embroider along your design. Touch the back of the fabric with the point of the needle and search for the end of your line or design. And once you've found it, pull the needle and thread up to the knot until it stops. Then, in the middle of the line that you drew with your pencil or chalk, about 1 centimeter away where you came out, dive the needle back down towards the table. And that is a running stitch. Let's repeat the steps. Search with your needle until you're about 1 centimeter away from your last stitch and pull the thread up towards the sky. Next, again, about 1 centimeter away from where we came up, we are going to sew down towards the table to create a 1 centimeter long stitch. Remember to keep your running stitch about in the center of your line or shape, and try your best to match up with the curves and angles of your design. Continue this process until you've reached the end of your line or shape. As you can see, I've completed my curved line with a running stitch, and I really like the look of it. It creates kind of like a broken line. After you've tried out the running stitch, let's turn it into a back stitch. A back stitch is basically 2 sets of running stitches that are offset in order to create a continuous line. So once you reach the end of your running stitch, reverse directions and sew running stitches in between the first set. So I'm going to start from the back of the hoop. I'm going to search with my needle to find the end of my last stitch. Next step is to find the beginning of the next stitch and poke the needle down through to the table. You want to watch out and make sure that you are fully pulling the thread through on each stitch, because if you don't, a tangle could happen. If it does, it's okay. Simply, slowly, untangle the thread at the back. You might even have to take the needle off to help you untangle it. I got mine untangled pretty quickly, so I'm ready to continue my back stitch by searching with my needle to find the end of that stitch and the beginning of the next. As you can already see, a back stitch creates a continuous line instead of a broken line like the running stitch. Continue filling in your running stitch with a back stitch until you reach the end of your line or design. Now, tangles are just a part of embroidery, so when it happens to you, all you've got to do is take a deep breath, take the needle off the end of the thread, and use the needle to untangle the thread or to take out bad stitches. Once you've got the thread untangled, then you can just rethread the needle and continue sewing where you left off. As you can see here, my tangle happened very early on in this embroidery project. It actually happened at the beginning of the running stitch. So, as sad as it was, I took out all of my stitches in order to backtrack to the point where the thread got tangled. And then I rethreaded my needle and re-sewed the running stitch and the back stitch. Please learn from my mistake and periodically check the back of your embroidery project to see if you have any tangles going on. Now, there are 2 instances where you will need to stop sewing and tie off your thread. And that is when the thread is as short as your hand, or if you've reached the end of the stitch and you need to change colors. And here's how to tie off the thread. First of all, make sure that you are ending your stitch on the back side of the embroidery hoop. So make sure the needle is coming out at the back. Next, slide the needle under the last stitch that you did and pull until a little loop appears. Before this loop disappears, backtrack the needle and catch that loop. Now, pull the string tightly. Let's create a double knot in the opposite direction that we went the first time and slide the needle underneath the last stitch once again. Pull the thread through until that loop appears and catch the loop. Once that's done, pick up some scissors and cut the embroidery thread near the knot. Even though we'll be doing many different stitches in this project, the way to tie off the thread is the same every time. Make sure you're on the back of the embroidery project, slide the needle underneath the very last stitch you did, and catch the loop, making sure to do a double knot. After your running stitch and back stitch is completed, it's time to get a new color of thread, measure it out to the length of your arm, and cut. Remember that we need to split this embroidery floss into 2, so we need 3 and 3 thread groups. Remember to let the bottom of this situation untwist itself, the bottom of the thread untwist itself as you go, and keep track of that second group of threads. Now it's time to thread the needle one more time. Make sure that you have a clean end to work with. And then after you've got the thread through, tie a knot at the other end of the string. Once your needle and thread is prepared, it's time to move on to our second stitch, which is called the chain stitch. So pick up your chalk or pencil and draw a straight line going from the top to the bottom of your embroidery hoop to follow as we complete this chain stitch. Once you've got your line, pick up your needle and start from the bottom of the embroidery hoop. Search with your needle until you have found the end of the line that you drew. Pull the thread through the muslin until it hits the knot, and then go back through the same hole down toward the table. And as you pull the thread, you'll notice that it creates a little loop that, as you continue to pull, gets smaller and smaller. Before that loop disappears, we want to take our needle a centimeter down our line and then catch the loop. Pull the thread all the way through to create your first chain stitch. After that, we're going to start over. We're going to dive back through the same hole that the string is coming out of, creating a loop that gets smaller and smaller as we pull the needle. And then we're going to drag or search with our needle to find a centimeter down our line that we drew and catch the loop. Let's watch it one more time. We're going to dive back down through the same hole that the string is coming out of, creating a loop. We are going to search with our needle to find a centimeter down our line. And before we pull, we're going to catch the loop. Repeat this stitch until you reach the end of the line that you drew. If you come to a point where your needle and thread is as short as your hand, you've got to stop stitching, tie off the string, and get a new one, restarting the chain from the bottom of the hoop. When you have reached the end of your line, it's time to end this stitch. And to make sure that it is secure, you are going to take your needle and jump over the last stitch in the chain. Just the string, just a tiny bit, so over top of that last chain link so that the needle is on the back end of the embroidery hoop. Now the last stitch has been anchored, and all we need to do is tie off this thread. So making sure we're on the back end of the embroidery project, we're going to dive underneath the last stitch and catch that loop before it disappears. I almost lost it there. Pull the knot tightly and repeat to create a double knot. Pick up your scissors and cut down near the knot to release the thread and get ready for another stitch. To start a new stitch, choose a new color of thread, cut it on arm's length, and split it into 3 and 3. Then thread the needle and tie a knot at the very end of the thread. And get ready for our next stitch, which is called an asterisk. For the asterisk, we are going to need a target with a little polka dot made with a pencil. Then pick up your needle and thread. Start at the back of the embroidery hoop and search with your needle until you hit that little target, that little pencil mark that you just drew. Poke your needle through and pull the thread up to the knot. Next, we're going to go directly above the target and create a very large stitch. Now we need to find our target once again. Search with your needle and go back through the pencil target from the beginning and pull through. Watch out for this one. This one likes to get tangled up. Make sure you're checking the back of your piece every once in a while to make sure that you didn't get a big tangle. Now let's go to the right of our target and create another large stitch. The challenge here is to try to make each one of your stitches the same length. So when you're done with that, find the target once again, pull your needle up and through, and going the same distance away from the target, create a stitch that points downward. Then find the center target again and create a stitch to the left. We're trying to make all of these stitches the same length. Now you should be able to see a T, and we are going to fill in the spaces in between the legs of the T with an X. So we're going to come through the center target, create a large stitch that goes in between the sections of the T on a diagonal. Back through the center, creating a long stitch that's the same length as what we've been doing the whole time, and create an X. Let's create leg number 3 of the X in between these two parts of the T. Back through the center and out once again. Now what we have to do is keep repeating this another time. We're going to keep adding like little spokes of a wheel in between the X and the T lines, making sure that we search with our needle to find the original bullseye that we drew with the pencil. Remember to always check the back to make sure that there's an asterisk on the back as well. I made a mistake and I didn't go through the center bullseye, and so it created this weird stitch on the back. So all I need to do is unthread my needle, take out the bad stitch, re-thread my needle, and then press on. After you have added at least 16 spokes to our asterisk, you're ready to tie off the needle. Make sure that your needle is coming out at the back of the embroidery hoop, and then find the nearest stitch. Slide your needle under that stitch and back it up to catch the loop. Reverse directions, slide the needle under the last stitch, catch the loop, and pull tightly to create a strong double knot. Then you can cut the thread and you have completed an asterisk stitch. This is one of my favorite stitches of all time. And that's why I decided to make more asterisks. Now it's time to learn stitch number 4. We are going to be learning the feather stitch. And for this one, you are going to need to mark 4 parallel side-by-side lines that do not cross or intersect. And they should be very close to each other like this. You can draw it with chalk or a pencil. And let's begin with a threaded needle. We know what to do. It should be an arm's length, it should be split in half, and it should have a knot at the end. Next, we're going to start at the back of our embroidery hoop like we always do, and we're going to search for the top line, the end of the top line, and pull the needle through to the knot. Now we're going to dive back down through to the back of the embroidery hoop on the 3rd line down. As you keep pulling the thread, you'll see that it creates a loop that gets smaller and smaller. Before that loop disappears, poke your needle up a little bit to the right from the first 2 stitches on that 2nd line down. Now you can pull the thread tightly and you've created your first feather stitch. But where do you go from here? From here, you need to jump down to the bottom line, and you should be moving a little bit to the right each time. And a little bit to the right on the bottom line, poke your needle down through. It's going to create a loop that gets smaller and smaller as you pull. Before the loop disappears, search with your needle to find the second to last line and pull tightly. That's feather stitch number 2. The last feather stitch in the pattern before it all repeats again is to find the top line, poke your needle through, pull until a loop appears. Before the loop completely disappears, we need to poke the needle a little bit to the right on the 2nd line down and pull. Now the whole pattern is finished, so we need to repeat. We skip a line down to the bottom, pull until the loop appears, search with the needle to find a smidge to the right on the line above it, and pull tightly. Watch out for tangles. Now, repeating the pattern, skip 2 lines to go to the top line, pull your needle through to create a loop. Don't let it disappear though. Before that loop disappears, we've got to catch it by searching with our needle on the second line down, catching that loop. I'm just going to let you watch the next couple stitches without directions. To finish this stitch, take your needle and dive back to the back of the embroidery hoop. Then turn your embroidery hoop over to the back side and find the nearest stitch to dive underneath, back it up, and catch the loop. Then we need to reverse directions. We need to slide under the stitch in the opposite direction and catch the loop, pulling tightly to create a knot, and then cut. The next stitch to learn is called a petal stitch, and these stitches look a little bit like flower petals. To begin, make sure you have a prepared piece of embroidery floss threaded through a needle. Search on the back of your embroidery hoop and poke the needle through. Then, right next to where you're coming out, dive the needle back down through towards the table, but watch out to not lose the loop. Use your thumb to catch the loop. Just a little bit underneath those 2 points that we just created, we're going to come back up through the fabric to create the petal stitch. The last thing we need to do is anchor the stitch by jumping just barely over the bottom of the petal, diving our needle back down toward the table. You can repeat this stitch in a circle in order to create a flower shape. Once you're done practicing the petal stitch and you're ready to change colors, flip your embroidery hoop over to the back. Make sure you're coming out with your needle at the back and tie off the thread by diving under the last stitch and catching the loop and repeating to create a double knot. I would like more practice on the petal stitch, and so I continued to practice them. After the petal stitch, we have one final stitch to learn, and that is called the satin stitch. The satin stitch is a great one to use to fill in a shape. So with your pencil or a piece of chalk, draw yourself some shapes to fill in with sewing. The easiest shapes to do are shapes with straight sides. Circular or round shapes are probably the hardest to nail. As you will see when I attempt to fill in this circular shape with embroidery. But here's how the satin stitch works. Search with your needle to find one side of the shape. Then pull the needle to the knot and jump over to the other side of the shape, pulling tightly. Right next to where you just came up, come up again with the needle. Make sure you're on the line still. Then jump across to the other side of the shape and dive down right next to where you did the first time. Keep repeating and moving towards the side of your shape and then fill in the other side. You could also start from one end of the shape and move your way to the opposite end. I decided to start my circle in the middle and work from there. So basically, these are giant running stitches that are right next to each other that fill in a shape. They should become shorter and shorter as your shape becomes narrower and narrower, And on the other hand, if your shape is getting wider and wider, then your stitches should get longer and longer. And as you can see, my shape is starting to be filled in with color. As you can see, once I get done with this orange quote-unquote circle, it didn't turn out to be quite a circle. And so I felt that I needed to practice some more. So after I finished my quote-unquote circle, I decided to change threads and give it another go. And even after that attempt, I wanted to practice even more and create an easier shape for me, like a rectangle, with green. The satin stitch is such a useful stitch, and it will be extremely useful to you as we get our second piece of muslin to actually create a picture or design with all of these stitches. And so make sure you get a lot of practice on this satin stitch. Once you've finished each shape, make sure you're coming out the back of the hoop, dive under the last stitch that you did, and catch the loop. It's just the same as all the other stitches. The only thing is that these stitches are really big. Dive under the stitch and catch the loop. Lastly, after you've pulled it tightly, grab some scissors and cut the thread. It's time for our final stitch. Make sure that you have a threaded needle with divided embroidery floss with a knot at the end. And we are going to perform a stitch called the seed stitch. This is one of my favorite stitches. It's second to the asterisk, but it's still really fun. The seed stitch is basically a bunch of running stitches, but not in a straight line. So you are going to search with your needle, poke up through the fabric, about 1 centimeter away, dive back down. Next, in a different spot, poke the needle through and dive back down about 1 centimeter away. As you can see, these are little running stitches, but like I said, they're not in a straight line. They are scattered all around the fabric, and that's why it's called a seed stitch. They look also like sprinkles a little bit, and that makes me like it even more. Continue filling up a space with seed stitches, and when you're done, tie it at the back like we always do. Now our needle sampler is finished. We can loosen the screw on top of our embroidery hoop to release our practice muslin, our sampler. And then when you're ready, reload your embroidery hoop with a fresh piece of muslin and start to design your own picture that you will be painting out of thread. The requirement is that you include one of every single stitch that we've learned in this image at least once. So we have learned the back stitch, the chain stitch, the asterisk, the feather, the petal, satin stitch, and the seed stitch, and you need to find a place and a purpose for each one of those stitches in your design. And once you've got it, draw it out with a pencil or a piece of chalk and fill in your picture with those stitches.